It's my great honor today to introduce Tom Bedecarré. Tom was recently named Silicon Valley's favorite ad man by Fortune magazine. Fortune cited him as being a rare hybrid, someone who is cred with techies and madmen alike. Tom is currently chairman of AKQA, the leading independent and most awarded digital agency. AKQA works with leading global brands and companies such as Audi, Delta, Google, Heineken, Nike, Target, Verizon Wireless, Visa, and Xbox from its 8 global offices in the US, Europe, and Asia. Tom is also president of WPP Ventures, a new Silicon Valley-based company which will explore a new digital investment opportunities for WPP, the leading communication services group. He is an enthusiastic entrepreneur who's Ernst & Young named Entrepreneur of the Year in Northern California for his leadership in the marketing services industry. Please join me in welcoming Tom Bedecarré to the stage, where he will be sharing his knowledge and expertise.
Hi, good morning. Thanks very much. Is everybody back from the break? So I'm going to talk today this topic I came up with a couple of months ago when I was invited to speak with storytelling through software, to talk about how our view of the world is changing about what's happening with the advertising industry. But then a funny thing happened about 4 weeks ago, which is I couldn't fly out here. All the flights to New York got canceled. And I just had my travel agent trying every day to get out to New York. And then I realized that there was no New York to come to, that this was canceled, the hotels were all dark, my office was dark. But in thinking about Hurricane Sandy and that storm, I started thinking about the advertising industry. And I'm sort of the only ad person, I think, on the program, and one of the few Silicon Valley people. But I think that the media industry has been a target that the ad industry can point to and say, oh, those poor guys in the newspaper business, look at the changes that they're going through. Or those poor guys in the magazine business, can you imagine the struggles that they're dealing with? But what I think that the advertising industry hasn't really braced is that they're going to face the same storm, and that we're in for a lot of trouble because there's a lot of changes that I just don't think we're ready for. And I speak for, I think, all of agencies, whether it's a traditional agency or even a digital agency. And so I think there's this storm coming, and the storm, we all know about. It's been the topic of just about every conversation this morning. And it's these massive changes and what's going on with mobile and social and data. And I just don't feel we're prepared for it. And I take some solace in the fact that if you look around, there's a lot of big companies that are technology companies that are focused on technology that haven't been ready for this. Hewlett-Packard a year ago was going to get out of the PC business because they just weren't ready for what was happening with tablets and mobile devices. All you have to do is look at the market share for Nokia and BlackBerry and see what's happened to them, and they were leaders in smartphones just a few years ago. So I don't feel as bad that the ad agency business isn't as ready as it could be. And I just thought talking about one element, just the tsunami of change that mobile, the number of devices and the number of people, there are 6 billion people around the world with mobile subscriptions, and 1 billion of those are smartphones. And just the rate of increase of traffic and devices and smartphones and tablets, I don't think we're ready for. And again, I take solace that Facebook was tripping all over itself earlier this year after its IPO because Wall Street didn't think they were ready for mobile. And they've got 600 million people out of their billion users on the Facebook mobile platform. So I do think everybody's got to work through this. And I also follow Mary Meeker, who's now at Kleiner Perkins, one of the leading private equity or venture capital companies out in Silicon Valley. And she's always got this chart about the delta between digital spend and digital time spent. And this year, she focused it on mobile. And she points out that 10% of time spent is on mobile devices, and only 1% of, and I think it's probably less than 1% of advertising is spent on mobile. And all the time I'm asked by people, so what's that mean for the monetization of mobile? I have VCs and investors and clients, when are we going to move on to mobile? And I think the only thing I can think of as an analogy for this, I've always wanted to use Derek Zoolander in a slide. So this is Derek looking at the Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good. And just before he sweeps it off to the floor, he says, "What is this, a center for ants? How do we expect to teach people to read if they can't even fit in the building? And I think people are saying, how do we fit ads on this? How are we going to put ads into Instagram and Facebook? And it's this, the same thing that they just can't get their mind around how is advertising going to fit on this. And so I think that's a good segue into a lot of what I'm going to talk about, which is we think the best advertising isn't advertising. And it's, I think, reflecting in the way we're changing our business and I think where the industry should be changing. And I've stolen this line from my business partner and colleague, Ajaz Ahmed. It's one of the 7 new laws for a world gone digital, a book. It's a mandatory plug. I have to always plug his book, he tells me. But we think that the best advertising is software. And all you have to do is take a look at what's happening in Silicon Valley. One of the most disruptive venture capital funds is Andreessen Horowitz. And Mark Andreessen talks about how software is eating the world. And there's just industry after industry, and certainly many media industries, where software has changed the whole economic system and turned leaders into laggards. And I think that's going to happen in advertising. We think it's more about apps than it is about ads. And again, I think marketers and brands have a hard time getting their head wrapped around that. I think publishers have a hard time getting their head wrapped around that. That it doesn't have to be about ads to add value and utility and entertainment and to delight customers. So much of what I've heard this morning. In the future, I think it's going to be more about apps. Another concept that we you hear a lot about is 360-degree marketing. But I think 360-degree marketing has turned into a set of matching luggage that brands want to have their TV and their print and their outdoor and their online and their mobile all look alike, and it's a beautiful match set. But that's not really what it's about. We think it's about 365 days a year and having engagement and having things that work in the media that they're supposed to work in, which is, again, not trying to shove an ad into a format that it doesn't belong. Another thing that I heard this morning about was interface design and user experience. And when you think about that, that's another whole radical set of changes, that how we're interacting with devices is about voice and touch and swiping and even gestures. Now where just a camera is going to recognize your movements and move cursors and move data. And so we talk a lot about the interface as the brand, and that it's the manifestation of the brand. And we think things like a keyboard and a mouse are going to be an artifact of the past, just like a rotary telephone, because you have to keep up with the way people want to use data and interact with the brand and interact with experiences. Another outdated thing, I think, is this idea that the creative team is a copywriter and an art director, which was a huge innovation when Doyle Dane Bernbach introduced this idea that we'd have a copywriter and an art director in the same office, working together. There wasn't the copy department and the art department. That was just a radical thought. But I think that's an outmoded world of these guys in this room coming up with an idea and then go hiring a production company or going hiring a studio to develop it. And we think that it has to change where their storytellers are still important. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect. We're trying to create content that's shareable and people want to pass along. But we think the other partner is a software developer. And I think there's too few companies where software developers are sitting side by side with the story developers. It's not the way the advertising industry has been geared to be set up. So this is just one example of something that we've developed that I think speaks to software storytelling. Nike's a longtime client. We used to build websites for them to launch a new shoe. This is something that was recently launched, Nike Plus Connect Training, and it's a video game, and video games, by the way, are storytelling as software is probably the best example. And it's a way to have a personalized workout in front of an Xbox Connect system that's watching your workout, that's customizing it, that's evaluating and assessing where you are, letting you benchmark where you are. And AKQA is not just doing the marketing for this, but we've been a partner for a long time with Nike to develop the interface, to develop how is it going to be shared with people, how are we going to motivate people, how can we bring in gamification and some of the things that are important to have people want to get involved and come back to it and share it. And to me, it's just one example of how it's the software that's going to create a story about fitness and about health and becoming a better you, which is the centerpiece of what Nike's all about. But it's not, this isn't something as literal as selling the latest shoes or the latest fitness gear. So just going back to this idea of if we're going to have storytellers and software developers in the same room working together, there's not a lot, there's not enough software developers. There's obviously a huge war for talent. And what I was thinking about is what are sort of, to me, some of the obstacles to get from where we are from where we need to be. And one of them, if not the first and most important one, is that we've got to train more software engineers. And I just am shocked that Microsoft, Adobe, Apple, Google, Facebook even, aren't doing more to train people how to use their platforms. Because, I hope that's not me. And so I think, you know, training is a huge thing, and I think it has to be a partnership between funding from brands and from agencies and from publishers and from all of these technology platforms. I think another thing that's really important is adopting a hacker culture. That this is a candid photograph of Sean Parker and Mark Zuckerberg working in their Palo Alto office 6 years ago. I just happened to get some very secret film. But you know, Mark Zuckerberg has created a whole hacker culture, and it's not about breaking into computers. It's about a way of developing software, about moving fast and breaking things and being open and aiming towards social value and trying to aim towards getting things done. And I think that if you live out in the Valley and you see how quickly companies can be started now, and you see how disruptive all these companies that are being started are happening all around all these different industries, you can see how slow and tedious I think the advertising, media, and marketing space could be. So I also think that we've got to embrace the rise of machines, and it's not the scary machines that of Terminator 3 when Skynet became aware, but I do think that if you go from that transition from copywriters and art directors to storytellers and software developers, we are going to get a point where machines are going to tell the stories. When you think about all the data that's available, whether it's photographs or car data or human sensor data, like if you have a fuel band or something like that, there's all this data, and I think the next generation is it won't even just be software developers that are creating the stories, but we're going to have stories created by machines. Another thing I just heard David talking about Hearst being an early adopter of Pinterest. Well, I think that there's a lack of partnership between brands and publishers and agencies to develop these products. You know, who knows photographs, photography, curating images better than Hearst or Condé Nast or the leading magazine publishers? Why aren't they working with companies that can help them develop the next Instagram, develop the next Pinterest? Why wait around for the next one to come around to be part? I just don't think people are thinking that way because, you know, where's the ad? I think it goes back to that. And instead, I think if you try to get, well, where are customers going that care about curating fashion imagery or food imagery or their lifestyle imagery, you wouldn't be thinking about it so square as to where we're going to put our next ad in what box. And then the last thing I'd like to say is I think you've got to come out to Silicon Valley. I think that so much of what's happening is happening in a 20-mile zone between San Francisco and Palo Alto that it's impossible to be focused on a discussion like today on the future of media without being there. So I would just challenge Pete and the Mashable crew to think about moving this conference to Palo Alto or San Francisco next year, because I think that's where the future of media is changing the most, and I think a conversation like this ought to be in the context of that. So I think that just like New York hasn't seen its last hurricane, this isn't the last of the storms or the big changes that are going to affect the advertising industry. But I do think that just like stocking up maybe with water and flashlights in your battery, I think these ideas of for storm preparedness, of training more engineers, adopting a hacker culture, being ready for how machines are going to be involved in storytelling, partnering for innovation, and thinking ahead to develop the next software, not wait to advertise on the next platform, and getting out to Silicon Valley are all ways that I think that the advertising industry can change and partner with publishers and keep up with these changes. So thanks very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.